Thank you for your hands for the virtual Peter Weibel, and it might be interesting or necessary to add that he is a very known philosopher, curator, and a very known feminist artist. And he studied mathematics. So that might explain his very strong interest in mathematics in our times as well as in historical times. So, has every one of you seen already the exhibition which ZKM brought to the forum? Can I see hands if it happened? Okay, thank you. So all the others, they have to promise me that you will see the exhibition after the session. I think you could have the very interesting and amazing experience to dive into the interactive digital art. So now we'll continue with my lecture, as Peter Weibel already announced. And I would like to show you some figures and some images of ZKM and tell you the story of the ZKM. Even the building of the ZKM is a story of change. An old munition factory was transformed into a cultural factory for the digital age. So it was a change from the age of industrial manufacturing to the digital manufacturing. The foundation of ZKM in the year of 1989 was an initiative of citizens. That's a very important fact. It was not a foundation of the state. It was an initiative from the middle, out of the middle of the citizens of Karlsruhe. And the idea was to demonstrate the public the potential of change caused by a new phase of globalization and the emerging internet, which came up at the same time. To visualize how that change and the connection of art, science, and technology could look like, from the perspective of art, I'll give you some information about the ZKM and its program. The first ideas of ZKM came up in the middle of the 80s. So no one had a smartphone in his pocket at this time. And it started with its activities in 1989, and 8 years later, it moved into its own building. Up to this time, we have a permanent, very close relationship to our audience. And since then, ZKM produces approximately 25 exhibitions and 250 events per year, and in addition, countless artistic productions, research projects in collaboration with approximately 800 international guest artists and guest scientists so far. But what is ZKM, this Center for Art in Media? It's 2 museums, but for the first time, it's a museum of all media, from painting to computer-based installation, from piano to electronic music, from performance to app art. But all our activities are dedicated to the dialogue between all formats of art, and it's particularly dedicated to digital art. But the ZKM is so much more than a museum, because we are not only collecting and presenting works of art and technology, but we are also host institutes for research and production. And in a way, we are a research center or a university combined with a museum and with artistic performances. That's why we call us center and not museum. The model of ZKM was the MIT Lab, Massachusetts, as well as the Centre Pompidou in Paris. And it combines actually technology, research, art, exhibition, electronic music, and events, and publication and documentation to present the change and the confluence of culture in our times. Now you might understand why USA Today, the biggest newspaper in America, called ZKM one of the 10 best places of the world to understand the digital revolution or to immerse into digital art. And that might be also the reason why more than 40% of the visitors of ZKM are younger than 35 years. So we attract intensively the so-called digital natives. To illustrate the structure of the ZKM, I would like to use the metaphor of the so-called Borromene rings. The Borromene rings had been the symbol of a very famous aristocratic Borromene family in northern Italy of the Renaissance in the 15th century. And if you put one ring away from this combination, the both other rings will fall apart. So the system is only stable with 3 rings. So they are a unit. The rings are valid in many cultures of the world as a symbol for collaboration and for the strength in unity. And it seems also to be known in the culture of India. So we find an example from the very early 6th century. The ZKM uses the symbol to visualize the interaction between its activities, exhibition and events, research and production, as well as collection and documentation. The focus is always the digital culture, and the aim is always education to a wide audience. These famous rings can also symbolize the triple of the often mentioned art, science, and technology, which can be seen as the success formula of the European expansion, which was the beginning of globalization 500 years ago. Art, science, and technology have also been the success formula of the Arabian and Italian Renaissance we already heard. And now we are moving into a new era again. We call this era Renaissance 2.0, so an update of the known Renaissance. The ZKM is one of the main cultural agents worldwide of this emerging new Renaissance. And let me now give you some example how the ZKM, which is obviously more than a classical museum, but rather an international platform for innovations and change, makes this triple clear to the public. So that's our main task, to deliver all these information, all the knowledge to a wide public. I want to start with an exhibition dedicated to the famous artist Olafur Eliasson. I'm sure that you already have seen works of him. When we showed his work 17 years ago, he was pretty unknown. But ZKM was interested in his work. It's very unique, and it's based on physical phenomena, like artificial waterfalls or light experiments. After this monographic exhibition at ZKM, Olafur Eliasson started his incredible successful career, and today he shows his work as tourist attraction in the Park of Versailles near Paris. But when we showed his exhibition, there were no review in any newspaper, but we have a very high count of visitors. You also see that the topic of the internet as well, control and censorship in the World Wide Web, has been the subject of exhibitions and publications of ZKM nearly 20 years ago. It demonstrates that the ZKM was one of the first cultural institutions to be aware of the beginning of the digital century. The second topic that ZKM took up very early was the globalization. 10 years ago, we started a project, Global Art in the Museum, to research the effects of globalization on the conditions of art production. With the exhibition User, the Century of the Consumer, we acknowledge the revolution of social media, pretty earlier than other cultural institutions. Media, so that's on our experience, media are no longer visual media. Media have become performative, media to use. Instead of the traditional passive viewer and spectator in a museum or theater, we have now to address the public as active participant and user, in a way as a co-producer of the art formats. Digital topics are in the focus of everyone and everything. Thus, currently ZKM has 3 exhibitions on tour around the world. All 3 shows are dealing with digital topics, and they are highly demanded, also due to their interactive performativity. So you can experience in the exhibition we brought to Mumbai, especially for the forum and for you. In collaboration with its partner in the city of Karlsruhe, ZKM invented 2015 the so-called Schlosslichtspiele. It's a term I can't translate, but I'm sure you can see what it is. Therefore, ZKM left the museum, the white cube of art, and moved into the public space, into the middle of the city, on the facade of the Baroque castle. Based on advanced digital video mapping technology, artists transform the known historical facade into a permanently changing virtual architecture. In the last 2 summers, nearly 1 million visitors were attracted by this spectacular light art festival, and it's free for everyone. The artist Ayal Gevar, one of the lecturers of the afternoon session, is a partner of ZKM, and he is just working on a very new and very advanced project, artwork, for this light art festival. So you have to see urgently his lecture later on. But how could art immerse into technology and science, and the way round? That's a central question. Around the year 1900, a rupture happened in the art, and a new system of modern art arises in the Western world. Abstract art eliminated the representation of the real world, and at the same time, real things and real actions replaced the painted representation of the real world. But with the advent of media, photography, film, video, and computer, for example, artists suddenly used similar machines and medias like scientists and engineers. They share a pool of common tools up to this time. Now, art, science, and technology become the 3 pillars, or the Borromeian rings, in the domain of creativity and change. They are the creative fields of society. But what we experience today is that creativity moves from science to technology. The great invention of today is the so-called Silicon Valley, which is mainly created by engineers and tool makers, less by scientists. Therefore, we speak of maker culture, where science, art, and technology belong together. And only the union of science, technology, and art can be the pillars, or the Borromeian rings, of creativity and of change in the digital age, which is the age of disruptive technologies. To these Borromeian rings, ZKM dedicated one of its most ambitious projects, the 300-day-long festival around the theme Globale Digitale, which means globalization and digitalization. The festival, Globale, showed a wide range of programs, including a series of exhibitions and of events and publications. The conceptual backbone of the festival was a quadruple. I have to explain. In millions of years of evolution, photosynthesis created a sphere of air and gas around the world, the so-called atmosphere. The answer of this evolution to the atmosphere was the creation of lungs, so we can breathe. The answer of evolution to the electromagnetic waves of the sun, which exist since the Big Bang, are the eyes. But only 400 years ago, we discovered that the Earth is magnetic. And only in the 19th century, we discovered electricity, even if the electromagnetic waves are in the world, in the universe from the beginning on. And the tools using these electromagnetic waves create, in addition to the natural atmosphere, a technological, mankind-created so-called infosphere around the Earth as a global communication net. And with all these new tools, machines and media, mankind created its own artificial evolution, the so-called exoevolution. And there are relationships between all these four phenomenons in the quadruple. The infosphere and the exoevolution were the key aspects of ZKM program of the Globale Digitale, and many of the artworks look more like a scientific laboratory. And in fact, many contemporary artists are working with scientific methods and tools. To show the dimension of the digital revolution and the infosphere, the Japanese artist Ikeda created an impressive, very huge installation based on big data from NASA and from CERN in Switzerland. The visitor could dive into the world of Higgs bosons as well as into the infinity of the universe based on the big data which flows through the museum. To show the dimension of exoevolution and tool culture or maker culture, ZKM presents a real and permanent cloud in the entirely empty museum halls. Not to paint a cloud, but to bring a real cloud into the museum was something quite impossible so far. And it was really a very interesting challenge and experience to work with a cloud. Due to the already mentioned triple of art, science, and technology, which are the drivers of change, the Innovation Festival Code N has entered the ZKM. Code N is the festival of the new, and ZKM seems to be part of the DNA of the new. Therefore, the most advanced and attractive part of the fair CeBIT in Hanover, you might know, moved last year first time to Karlsruhe. Abhijit Pawar gave us the privilege to be present at that festival Code N and noticed how many start-up companies from 25 nations competed for several prizes and investors. It became obviously that entrepreneurship has become part of creativity and art. This is why the founders of Code N decided to change the festival from a traditional fair to a museum, better to a center for advanced art, to a center for art-based change. Not only science meets art, but from now on, also advanced economy meets art. And we realized that future economy depends on science, technology, and arts. They are the agents of change. These agents support the change from the formula of the 20th century, machinery, materials, and man, into a formula of the digital 21st century, which means media, data, and man. So I would like to conclude my lecture with the work of Sascha Walz, a very known female choreographer. And she once told me that her team always says that her idea is impossible to realize. But finally, it always works. It seems to be a question of innovation and change. Thank you very much for your attention. And I would like to announce you now Professor Gesche Joost. She's running a design lab, a very interesting one, on the University of Fine Arts in Berlin. And she has high skills in computing and in computer-based design, and I would like to give her the word. Thank you very much.